My name is Emily. I've always tried to be a good person, to do what's right, to keep my head down, to push forward no matter what life threw at me. But if I'm being honest, life hasn't exactly been kind in return. I'm in my late 30s now, and it feels like I've spent most of those years just trying to survive. I've lost people I cared about, sacrificed things no one noticed, and worked exhausting jobs just to keep the lights on. Somewhere along the way, I started to wonder if any of it really mattered. If I really mattered. I don't think I ever stopped believing in God entirely, but I guess you could say I lost faith that He was paying attention to someone like me. Every day was the same. The alarm would jolt me awake before dawn. I'd drag myself out of bed, force down some coffee, and head to work. I managed an office at a small, forgettable company, a place where people only showed up because they had to. My boss was relentless, the deadlines endless, and no matter how hard I worked, it was never enough. Evenings were worse. I'd return to my small apartment, greeted by nothing but silence. No family waiting, no one to ask how my day was. Most nights, I'd scroll mindlessly through my phone, flipping between TV channels, trying to distract myself from the hollowness gnawing at me. But distraction could only do so much. I never told anyone how I felt. Who would want to hear it? Everyone had their own struggles. Why would mine matter? Physically, I wasn't doing great either. I'd never been the healthiest woman, but stress had been taking its toll. Random chest pains came and went, sharp enough to make me pause, but I brushed them off every time. It's just stress, I told myself. Nothing to worry about. I was wrong. That night changed everything. It was late, and I was still at the office, trying to finish a project that had been dumped on my desk last minute. By the time I left, the city was quiet, the streets nearly empty. I was exhausted, barely keeping my eyes open as I drove. All I could think about was getting home, collapsing into bed, and escaping for a few hours. Then it hit, a tightness in my chest, sharper than before, more insistent. At first, I tried to ignore it, gripping the steering wheel tighter, willing it to pass. But it didn't. The pain spread like wildfire, radiating down my arms, crushing my ribs like a vice. My breath came in short, ragged gasps. My vision blurred. Something is really wrong. I needed to pull over, but my hands were shaking so badly I couldn't grip the wheel. My heart was pounding erratically, each beat more strained than the last. A terrifying realization crashed over me. I'm not going to make it home. The car swerved. Headlights flashed. There was a screech of tires, the jarring impact of metal crumpling, and then nothing. Not darkness, not silence, just nothing. Then, something shifted. I woke up, or at least I thought I did. But the moment I opened my eyes, I knew something was different. I felt weightless, detached. No pain, no struggle, just an eerie calm. And then I saw it. Below me, resting in a ditch, was the twisted wreckage of my car. The windshield shattered, the metal frame crushed. And inside, slumped over the wheel, was me. I was staring at my own body. The realization should have sent me into a panic, but strangely it didn't. There was no fear, no confusion, just a sense of being a passenger to something beyond my control. I watched as flashing lights appeared in the distance. People ran to the wreck, their voices urgent. Someone pulled out a phone, another tried to pry the door open. I wanted to call out, to tell them I was right here, I was fine, but I wasn't. I wasn't there. Not in my body. I was somewhere else. Everything around me began to shift, like a signal flickering in and out of tune. The sounds of the world, sirens, voices, metal scraping against pavement, began to fade. The scene blurred. Something was pulling me away. And then there was silence. Not the kind you hear in an empty room or on a quiet night. This silence was alive. It pressed against me, deep and endless, as if it was waiting for me to notice something. That's when I saw it. A light. Not just any light. It was radiant, alive, impossible to describe. Brighter than the sun, yet soft. Warm. Inviting. It didn't just glow. It called to me. I hesitated. I didn't know what this was, where it would take me. But as the warmth spread over me, filling me with a peace I had never known, my fear melted away. This was real. And as I moved closer, I knew, deep in my soul, that stepping into that light would change everything. Forever. The warmth of the light surrounded everything around me, like an invisible embrace, pulling me forward. There was no ground beneath my feet, no walls around me, yet I felt no fear. If anything, I felt weightless. The pain I had felt just moments ago, the crushing tightness in my chest, the helplessness as my body collapsed behind the wheel, it was all gone. Instead, a deep sense of calm filled me. It wasn't just relief, it was as if something had lifted a burden I didn't even realize I had been carrying. I looked around, trying to make sense of where I was. The space was unlike anything I had ever seen before. It was neither dark nor bright, but something in between, like the first moments before dawn when the world is still caught between night and day. Shapes and shadows flickered around me, shifting and reforming in ways that defied logic. And yet, none of it frightened me. What drew me in was the light ahead. It wasn't like any light I had ever known. It didn't glare or blind. It wasn't harsh or demanding. It simply existed, radiating something beyond warmth, something deeper. Love, understanding, a presence greater than anything I had ever encountered. It was calling me. I took a step forward, though I wasn't sure if I was truly moving or if the space itself was shifting around me. The closer I came, the more I felt an overwhelming sense of familiarity, as if I had always known this place existed, even if I couldn't remember when or how. And then a voice. It wasn't loud, but it filled everything. It resonated through me, not just in my ears, but deep within my soul. Emily, my name, spoken with such tenderness, with such certainty, that it made my breath catch. There was no doubt in me about who it was. Jesus. I couldn't see him yet, but I could feel him. The presence before me was so overwhelming, so immense, that it made every doubt, every fear, every question in my life seem small in comparison. I tried to speak, but words failed me. How do you address someone who already knows every thought, every moment, every secret part of your heart? I didn't need to say anything. As I moved closer, the light began to take shape. The brilliance softened, and there he was. At first, I couldn't fully comprehend what I was seeing. His presence was so radiant, so filled with power, that it felt impossible to take in all at once. But as my eyes adjusted, I saw him clearly. And in that moment, I knew nothing in my life would ever be the same again.
The moment Jesus took my hand, a flood of images filled my mind. They were not just visions, they were memories imprinted into the very fabric of time. I wasn't just seeing them, I was experiencing them. At first, I saw ancient lands, rich and untouched, filled with towering trees, rivers that shimmered like liquid gold, and skies more vibrant than anything on earth. There were people, men and women dressed in garments of deep reds, golds, and whites. They were not just living, they were thriving. Then I noticed something else. They were praying, chanting, worshiping. But it was more than that. Their voices carried power. When they spoke, the air around them vibrated. The ground beneath them pulsed with energy. They were not just reciting words. They were moving something unseen, something deeply spiritual. These people, Jesus said, were given a gift, a connection to the divine that runs deeper than human understanding. I watched in awe as healers placed their hands upon the sick, and sickness fled. I saw elders speaking words, and the very elements, wind, water, fire, responded. They were not just people of faith. They were people of power. But then the vision shifted. The colors darkened. The sounds of praise and worship were drowned out by the distant cries of pain. I saw ships, massive and looming, appearing on the horizon. The people, once so full of strength, now faced something they had not known before: chains, shackles, suffering. I felt my heart shatter as I saw them taken from their lands, torn from their homes, their children ripped from their arms. Yet even in the midst of their captivity, their spirits did not break. They tried to steal their freedom, Jesus said softly, but they could not steal their connection to me. I saw them praying beneath the decks of slave ships, their hands bound but their souls unshaken. I saw them whispering ancient words of power in the darkness, keeping the light of their faith alive. Even as they were forced into foreign lands, their spirits carried something the world could not take away. Then Jesus turned to me, his expression both tender and serious. Their strength was feared, he said. Not just their physical strength, but their spiritual strength. And so, the world sought to bury it. The vision shifted again, moving forward in time. I saw how the oppression changed. How chains were removed from bodies but placed upon minds. How systems were built to keep this power hidden. How faith was twisted into a tool of control instead of liberation. Yet through it all, the light within them never faded. It was buried, hidden, suppressed, but not destroyed. Jesus looked at me, his eyes filled with certainty. "The time has come," he said. "The awakening has begun." The visions before me changed once again. I was no longer looking at the past. I was seeing the present, our world right now. But something was different. Something was stirring. I saw young black men and women, their eyes filled with something powerful. Asterisk asterisk understanding asterisk asterisk. They were beginning to see beyond what they had been told, beyond the limitations placed upon them. I saw them stepping into roles of leadership, not through force but through wisdom. I saw prayer gatherings growing, not out of obligation but out of hunger. People falling to their knees, not just in churches, but in homes, on streets, in places where faith had once been silenced. Then I saw something even more extraordinary. I saw hands being placed on the sick, and healing taking place. I saw words being spoken, and chains, invisible yet real, breaking off of people's lives. I saw communities, once divided, coming together, not through politics, not through force, but through faith. Through a realization that they had always carried something greater than the world had told them. Jesus spoke again, his voice filled with both love and urgency. "The enemy fought to keep this power buried," he said. "He used fear, distraction, division. But now it is rising. The time has come for them to remember who they are." The weight of his words settled deep within me. This was not just about me. This was not just about one person's experience. This was about an awakening, a global shift. I turned to Jesus, my heart pounding with both awe and uncertainty. "But how will they know?" I asked. "How will they awaken if they've been told for so long that they have no power?" Jesus smiled, his expression filled with unshakable confidence. "The truth cannot be hidden forever," he said. "It is already stirring in their hearts. They are feeling it, even if they cannot yet name it. Some will resist it. Some will fear it. But those who are ready, those who listen, will lead the way for others." The vision before me grew even clearer. I saw leaders emerging, not celebrities, not politicians, but spiritual leaders. People who had been overlooked and underestimated. People who carried wisdom that came not from books, but from something deeper. And I saw them speaking, not just to their own communities but to the world. Their voices carried weight, not because they demanded to be heard, but because truth always carries power. Then Jesus looked at me once more. "Lily," he said, "you must tell them." A tremor of realization moved through me. "Me?" Jesus nodded. "You have seen. You have heard. Now you must speak." I swallowed hard, my mind racing. "But what if they don't believe me?" His smile was soft yet firm. "It is not your job to convince them. It is your job to share what you have been given. The ones who are ready will hear. And those who are not, their time will come." The light around us began to shift. I could feel something changing. The warmth, the weightlessness, it was fading. Panic flared in my chest. "Wait, I don't want to go back yet." Jesus stepped forward, placing a hand over my heart. The moment he touched me, peace washed over me once again. "You must," he said gently. "Your time here is not finished. But when you wake, you will remember." I looked into his eyes, memorizing every detail. Then, in a single breath, the light vanished, and I opened my eyes to the sound of a heart monitor beeping beside me. The first thing I felt was the cold. It was sharp, jarring, pulling me out of the warmth I had just been immersed in. My chest ached as if I had been hit by a force greater than anything I had ever known. I heard muffled voices, distant and frantic, then the steady beeping of a machine somewhere close. I tried to open my eyes, but they were heavy, as if they had been sealed shut. When I finally managed to lift my eyelids, I saw a fluorescent light above me. Harsh, artificial, nothing like the radiant glow I had just been surrounded by. I was back. I was alive. My vision blurred as figures moved around me, their voices growing clearer with each passing second. A nurse leaned over me, her face filled with both relief and shock. "She's awake," she called out. Another voice, a doctor this time, gave instructions I couldn't fully comprehend. My mind was still somewhere else, trapped between two realities, the one I had returned to and the one I had just left behind. A thought flashed through my mind. What if it had all been a dream? A hallucination caused by my injuries? But then I moved my hand. I turned my palm upward, my breath catching in my throat. The mark was still there. The same faint symbol I had never thought twice about before. Except now I knew what it meant. Tears welled in my eyes as everything came rushing back. The visions, Jesus's words, the truth that had been revealed to me. It hadn't been a dream. It had been real. And now I had a mission to fulfill. The days that followed were a blur of recovery. Doctors came in and out, explaining how close I had been to death, how miraculous it was that I had survived without major internal injuries. They used words like unbelievable and inexplicable, but I knew better. It wasn't science that had brought me back. It was Him. When I was finally discharged, stepping out of the hospital and back into the world felt surreal. Everything looked the same. The streets, the buildings, the people rushing past me, lost in their own worries. But I was not the same. I wasn't sure where to begin. How do you step into a purpose that feels so much bigger than yourself? For the first few days, I kept the experience to myself. Not because I doubted it, but because I wasn't sure how people would react. Would they think I was crazy? Would they believe me? The first person I told was my best friend, Simone. We sat in my apartment, sipping tea, and she could tell something was different before I even spoke. "You're not the same," she said, studying me. "What happened?" I took a deep breath. And then I told her everything. At first she didn't speak. She just stared at me, her expression unreadable. But then, something shifted in her eyes. "I don't know what to say," she admitted. "I mean, I believe in God, but this? I wouldn't have believed it either," I said. "Until it happened." She shook her head, still processing. "So what now? What do you do with this?" That was the question, wasn't it? I didn't have an exact answer. All I knew was that I couldn't go back to the way things had been before. "I think I have to share it," I said finally. "Not just with you, but with others. If Jesus brought me back for a reason, I can't keep that reason to myself." Simone nodded slowly. "Then do it." And so I did. First I started small. I shared my story with a few close friends. Some listened with open hearts. Others reacted with skepticism, which I had expected. But every time I told it, something stirred inside me. One day, I was invited to speak at a small church gathering. I stood in front of a group of people, my hands trembling slightly as I looked at them. What if they didn't believe me? What if they thought I was making it up? But then I remembered Jesus's words. Asterisk, it's not about being perfect. It's about being willing. Asterisk. So I took a deep breath. And I spoke. I told them about the emptiness I had felt, the moment I thought my life was over, and the incredible love that had met me in the light. I told them that Jesus had not forgotten me, and that He had not forgotten them either. When I finished, an older woman in the front row wiped tears from her eyes. "Thank you," she said softly. "I've been struggling with my faith. I needed to hear this." In that moment I knew. This was my mission. Not to convince everyone. Not to have all the answers. But to share what I had seen, what I had felt, what I now knew to be true. And maybe, just maybe, in doing that I could bring light to others the same way it had been given to me. If this story has spoken to you, if it has touched something deep in your heart, I invite you to be part of this journey. Subscribe and like this video and leave a comment with your name and city. I would love to send a special greeting in the next video. We are building a community of faith, and your support means everything. Life didn't go back to normal after that day. Couldn't. I had been given a mission, a truth so powerful that keeping it to myself felt impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I could still see Jesus standing before me, his voice echoing in my soul. Tell them to rise, So I did. I shared my experience whenever I could. At first it was with small groups, then with larger gatherings. Some listened with open hearts, others with skepticism. But I knew that wasn't for me to control. My role wasn't to convince, it was to speak. And slowly, something started to happen. People who had been lost in doubt began to pray again. Those who had felt powerless started to step into their faith. The words Jesus had spoken weren't just for me. They were for everyone who was ready to hear them. I no longer questioned my purpose. I had seen the truth, and now I was living it. If this message has spoken to you, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video, subscribe, and comment your name and city below. I'd love to give you a special shout out in the next video. Keep watching because the next story could change everything for you.